Hi and welcome back to part 3 of this results coach training. I'm Elwyn Robinson, founder of Lionheart Herbs Complete Detox Academy and the Health Coaching Institute. And this training is all about teaching you how to be a successful, highly valued, highly valuable health coach who helps people get big results in their life. In fact, who empowers people to take consistent, strategic action until they get real, powerful, long-lasting results. Now in this video right now, we're going to get straight into some training. First of all, you're going to learn the biggest mistake you can make with coaching and with influencing people. I'm going to teach you exactly how to overcome that. I'm also going to teach you, and this is really the centerpiece of the training, the 10 qualities of an outstanding, successful coach. Because what you're going to learn is if you manage to bring those qualities into your life and really exemplify those qualities, then you're going to be an excellent coach, an outstanding coach, really with very little effort on your part. It's just going to seem natural and normal and easy to really help people get amazing results. So that's really important to understand. We're also going to go through what's your results coach rating, right? So with each of those 10 qualities, I'm going to ask you to rate yourself, and then you're going to come up with an overall results coach rating. And this is not a way to, congratulate yourself or to feel bad. This is just a way of assessing, okay, this is where I'm at, and these are the areas that I need to work on. These are the areas I need to improve on to really get to the stratospheric levels of success and being able to help people that I want to be at. And then of course, we're also going to look at how to make these 10 results coach qualities, the ones which are so important, effortless for you. So how to incorporate them into your life without you having to do all the hard work of learning to do them in a conscious way. Also, as a bonus, and I wasn't sure if I was going to reveal this in the free trainings, but I've decided to do so, I'm going to reveal to you the one tactic which, once learned, makes you 10 to 100 times more valuable than others who do something similar. Right? So if you're a health coach, you're going to be 10 to 100 times more valuable than other health coaches out there. And I say that not as a matter of hyperbole or hype or anything like that. That's a fact. That's literally the difference that it will make in terms of your real world value if you do this and you do it right. So make sure you watch out for that. Now, just before we get into that brand new training, I just want to do a very quick recap to remind you what we covered in the previous 2 videos and to set the stage perfectly for what we're going to do next. So in video number 1, we really covered in detail how information in and of itself is inadequate in order to be able to help people, right? In the vast majority of cases, it's not enough, and in fact, often it's actually detrimental and unhelpful. So just saying to people, oh, you should eat more of this, or you should eat less of that, or this would be a good idea, or that would be a good thing to stop doing, doesn't really help them in most cases, right? We learn that actually committed action leading to results is what's valuable. And so if you can help a client do that, if you can empower a client to do that, that's the most valuable thing you can offer them. So they're going to be happy, they're going to be appreciative, and that's going to make you very highly valuable, very highly sought after, and very highly rewarded, right? So your most valuable asset in life is the ability to empower people to take consistent strategic action until they get real, powerful, long-lasting results. Now in video 2, we also covered how the most important key for really mastering this is to master the art of influence. And we learned that influence is not actually about controlling people, forcing them, commanding them, telling them what to do, right, manipulating them. It's not any of that. A couple of definitions. Influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone, right? Also the power to change or affect someone, the power to cause changes without directly forcing them to happen, right? This is the skill that we really want to get in order to be able to be as helpful and empowering as possible to other people. Now the challenge is that a lot of us have some mental blocks to unleashing the full influential power that we have within us, and that's mainly because we've been taught some things that are very false about influence. We have some negative associations, and we may have some fears. So I addressed some of those in the last video. We looked at the idea of, is influence actually bad, like a lot of us think it is, and we've learned that actually, as a good person who cares about people and has something to share with people in the world, it's your duty to learn and become good at influence, right? And just to be safe, you want to make sure you only help or influence people when you have their permission, right? And that makes it absolutely certain that you're operating within the field of integrity. Now, the other myth that's really big that we looked at is the idea of I'm no good at influence, right? Some people got it, some people ain't, I ain't, right? I haven't got it. And so we actually learned that with a reframe that when I unlock my innate ability, so we discovered that in fact it's innate, right? This is something that all of us have within us, and if we seem to lack that ability, it's only because we've blocked it, or because we've stifled it, or because we've shut it down, not because we don't have it, right? So when I unlock my innate ability to influence, I got able to make a profound difference in many people's lives, right? And we said just to be safe as well, to make sure we stay in integrity, we only help people get results that they're clear they want, right? We don't try and help people do things that we think they should want. We only help people with what they actually want. And of course, to really cement in the idea of just how important influence is for you, how important it is, first of all, for you to accept the importance of it and to realize this is the main thing for you to work on in order to be able to help people. And then second of all, to maybe look at the problems and challenges and frustrations that we can have if we don't have influence. So we recognize that actually a lot of things that maybe we've been feeling sorry for ourselves about, or blaming other people, or whatever it might be, or making up kind of reasons for, the root of it is actually a lack of our ability to influence, right? So challenges like feeling unable to help people that we care about, feeling helpless, feeling frustration and disappointment, feeling like we're not good enough, feeling inadequate, feeling pitied or disrespected, feeling ignored, not being valued, not having abundance, having this endless kind of lack or scarcity. All of these things we can actually, when we look at it, work out, oh, this is really coming from a lack of influence. Of course, accompanied by integrity, which we're going to talk about in this training. Now, with influence, we realize actually we're able to make a difference, at least potentially. We can't force anyone to make a difference, to change if they don't want to, but we have the potential if we have their full permission and you know, they appreciate what we can do. We have peace of mind, right? We have fulfillment and satisfaction. We have appreciation from people and respect from them. We feel heard and understood rather than ignored, right? We feel and are highly valued, highly appreciated, highly rewarded, highly respected, all those kind of things. And we also have an ease in creating wealth, creating abundance, creating the kind of quality of life for ourselves that we want, whether you want more time freedom, whether you want a more beautiful environment, whatever it is, those things tend to come much more easily when you have all these other things sorted. And then lastly, to make sure this training isn't just conceptual, though I'm giving you some practical stuff you can get started with straight away, we looked at the 3 universal keys to influence, right? So in video number 4, next video, we're going to go into the 9-step results coaching process. You're going to learn it really thoroughly, but these are like the broad overview. So first of all, you must have clarity, right? You must understand truly the person who you're seeking to help, the person who you're seeking to empower, the person who you're seeking to influence, right? And that usually comes with empathy, especially, also really focusing, paying attention to them and being really, really curious, seeking to understand them. We talked about how you can't assume that people already know why, right? And in fact, a lot of the time, motivating someone, making someone not just drag themselves into doing something, but really feel good about it, is understanding why. And understanding why they already do what they do. And one of the biggest mistakes we make when we're attempting to help someone take action is we tell them our reasons why, or the reasons why they should, rather than the reasons why they would actually be driven to, or compelled to, or motivated to, which are deep within them and intrinsic. And then step 3, how to create an irresistible vision of the result they want. And I talked you through a step-by-step process where I helped you create an irresistible vision for what you want in terms of being a results coach, being a health coach, being someone who helps to empower someone to get real lasting results. Okay, so now you understand why helping people get results is important, right? Not just giving them information. You understand that influence is really the way that we help people to be empowered to create those lasting results in a way that's not forcing or manipulative or anything negative, right? That's positive and uplifting and inspiring and motivating. So what's the biggest mistake most people make when it comes to influence? And I would say it's actually really simple. It's when you assume that you have influence, right? You assume that you already have it. Now there's one exception to this. I'm going to talk you through this one exception in a minute. And this one exception is the reason why I wanted to save this very primary mistake for this video and not include it in the last video. Just for a second though, I want you to look at the word assume, right? Generally, whenever we assume, we make an ass out of you and me. Gotta love that one, right? Gotta love the English language. So it's to assume that you have influence. Now, usually when we assume we have influence, when we make that mistake, we're doing it based on roles and titles, right? And so when I'm empowering people to be coaches, when I'm empowering people to get results, especially when they're working with maybe colleagues or employees or employers or family members or spouses or friends or whatever it might be, I often see that they're making this mistake. It's one of the most universal mistakes, and it's one that anyone can get into, even a really good coach, even a really good influencer, right? So we all make this mistake. And it's to assume that just because of your role or title, that you should already have influence, or that influence shouldn't be necessary, and that a person should just listen to you and they should just do what you recommend, right? Now, you probably heard the word should there a lot, and of course, whenever we have a lot of shoulds, we're probably making some kind of factual error, and that's certainly the case in this case. So normally what we'd say to ourselves when we're making this mistake is something like, you should listen to me because I'm your ... and it might be because, so it could be boss, right? You should listen to me because I'm your boss. I'm your boss, I pay you, you should do what I say, right? Or because I'm your mother, right? I'm your mother, so listen to me. Or I'm your father, so listen to me. I'm your husband, so listen to me. I'm your wife, so listen to me. I'm your, especially big sister or big brother, right? So therefore you should listen to me. Now, if any of those things work for you, and kind of fair enough, but I would still say that this is not the best way to get your influence. This is not the best way to get the authority that encourages people to listen to you, pay attention, do what you recommend in order to get the results they want, right? It's not the ideal. By the way, is it just these? No, I mean, it could also be because I'm your son, right? You should listen to me because I'm your son. You should listen to me because I'm your daughter. You should listen to me because I'm your employee or because I'm your friend. And of course, I could have gone on and on, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece, whatever, right? But there are lots and lots of reasons we can say because of the role that we have in relation to someone, that means that they should automatically listen, they should automatically at least try what we're saying, what we're recommending, right? And so if you've had a frustration helping people to get results that they want, helping people with their health, then you may well notice that you've actually, without realizing it, been making this mistake, right? Now, is it only these kind of roles which get in the way? Absolutely not. It can be titles as well. So what about these titles, right? You should listen to me because I'm your teacher, right? You should listen to me because I'm your doctor, or because I'm your therapist, or because I'm your captain. I was trying to think of some kind of military thing, right? Because I'm your supervisor, because I'm your dentist, even because I'm your health coach, right? Now, I realize in each of these cases, sometimes you really should listen to the person in that role, and there's good reason for that. However, what we have to understand is that just because someone is, gets a qualification and is now a teacher or a doctor or a therapist or a captain or a supervisor or a health coach or anything, doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have much influence just based on that title, right? That you get influence from other qualities, and they're the qualities that I'm going to share with you in this training. Now, sometimes having the title gives you a boost in those qualities that I'm going to share with you, and therefore it's kind of helpful for helping you have influence. But you'll find people in all of these professions and any others who, despite having the title, they really struggle because they don't have the qualities of influence, So the doctor who tells people to brush their teeth and floss, and everyone comes in, 6 months later, a year later, whatever it might be, and it seems like no one's listened to them, right? And if they were better at influencing, maybe they would be able to help people to take consistent action and do what's necessary to keep their oral hygiene good so that they have less problems, right? Or ditto if a doctor tells someone that you have issues with your heart, you need to exercise more, you need to eat less saturated fat or whatever it is doctors say. If a teacher tells that you need to do something for your own best interest, if someone working above you in a military setting, if a therapist tells you that you need to, avoid contact with a certain person, it doesn't matter, right? Just the title in itself, here's the point. Just the title in itself doesn't necessarily give you the influence. It may to some degree, and especially though in this day and age, more and more titles mean less and less. So I think something like 80 years ago, the fact that I'm a doctor meant pretty much, that almost everyone would do what you say. That's not the case anymore, right? It's not the case in any of these very official sounding titles, and it's not the case in this one either, right? And so what I want you to realize is that the title, while it's not nothing, it's secondary to being an influential person, to being a person of influence, to having the qualities that we're talking about here. And so while all of these roles, all of these titles can to some degree carry the aura of influence, you still have to carry that, right? And with all of these, we can think of probably exceptions where there's someone who has that role or has that title who is not really influential, who is not helping other people to reach their full potential, who's not helping other people to get what they really want, who's not helping someone else to listen, pay attention, take consistent action, get results, right? So I want you to understand that all of these things are secondary at best, and what really matters is the qualities of influence. Okay, now before we get into those 10 qualities, let's look at that factor which, if you do it, will make you 10 to 100 times more valued and more rewarded than anyone else who does something similar to what you do, right? So most institutions teaching health or teaching coaching or both will never teach you this, right? We'll look at why in a second once I reveal it. So what is it, right? It's your willingness to what? It's your willingness to appropriately challenge, right? Appropriately challenge. Now, appropriately is a key word there, as is challenge as well, right? We're going to look at why challenge is so important next. Why is it important to do challenging appropriately? We want to make sure we're not just challenging people for the sake of challenging them first and foremost, right? We don't want to go around just saying, hey, you know, you're eating too much, or hey, you're eating the wrong thing, or that kind of thing, right? That just out of the blue, that's really not helpful. We want to make sure we do it in the appropriate setting. First of all, of course, we must have permission to actually do so. Second of all, we have to have built up enough connection with the other person before we do it. In fact, I won't talk you through all the guidelines for appropriately, because you're going to learn that in the next video, in video 4, when I talk you through the 9-step results coaching process. So let's look at challenge for a second, right? Why is challenge so important? Well, why do most institutions not really teach this, not really teach the importance of it, not really teach why it's so crucial to do it and to do it well? I would say either they don't know, right? Unfortunately, in academia, there's a lot of people who are teaching things who don't have any real life experience doing it. So unfortunately, a lot of the time that's the case. However, I think the other reason is also really compelling. And that's that they're scared, right? They're scared to challenge people, and so therefore they're also scared to teach other people to challenge people. Now, you know, maybe it's quite easy to challenge your pupils or your students, but it's certainly nowhere near as easy to challenge someone who's maybe a client. Maybe you're afraid of losing your clients, you know, maybe you're afraid of if you challenge them, then they're going to get angry with you and upset with you, or if you challenge them, then they'll go away and you've lost that relationship, you've lost that income, you'll lose your whole business. All this fear can come up around the whole issue of challenging people. Most people, by the way, just have it deeply ingrained in them, irrespective of any of that practical, you know, here and now stuff, that they shouldn't challenge people, right? Especially women, unfortunately, have had that ingrained in them, that they mustn't challenge people, they mustn't be challenging to them, which is a real shame, because my experience is that women are as talented, probably more talented than men, at really getting in and doing this very well. But so that fear is the thing that holds us back, and just a real not understanding this is something that offers exceptional value to people. So why is this so valuable, right? Well, it's based on a really, really simple concept, which is that most people are held back most by their weakest link, right? So if you imagine a person is you know, composed of a chain with all these different links, and then in order for a person to be stronger, in order for a person to be healthier, in order for a person to be more successful and productive and happy and all those good things in life, they need to be able to resist more pressure, right, without breaking. And so in this case, the weakest link is the thing that's going to be the most important thing, right? Because no matter how strong the other links in the chain are, whatever the weakest link of the chain are, that's really the limit of that person, because once that weakest link breaks, the whole chain is broken, right? And that's it. There is an example of this, for instance, in nutrition, right? There are, you know, over 100 nutrients that you need, and the truth is that if you are chronically deficient in even one of them, you could have severe illnesses or even have your life threatened or be dead, just based on the lack of that one nutrient. You could have every other nutrient at a perfect level or topped up really high, right? But that one nutrient that's low is ruining everything else and stopping everything else from working. And so it's exactly the same with whatever challenge you've got going on. That challenge, which is the weakest link in the chain, is the thing that's holding you back and stopping you living up to your full potential, right? So now, the challenge that most people have is that they have a blind spot for this, right? They have a blind spot for their weakest link. So if you're familiar with the term blind spot, it's because there is literally an area where your eyes cannot see You might want to look this up. I'm sure you could Google it, and you'll see that on a printed page, or I think a screen, if you look at a certain, if you look and focus on a certain area, that you just won't see an object in another area. It will just appear not to exist to you, right? And now this is our capacity for self-deception. And this is a very important survival skill, our ability for self-deception. Fascinating book by Daniel Goleman, I really recommend if you want to get more into that. The capacity or the psychology of self-deception, I believe. But basically self-deception is a survival instinct. It's how we make ourselves unaware of things which otherwise would cause us anxiety in order to be able to basically get on with life, and that's cool, right? So if we were constantly aware of our biggest weakness, that might stop us from having the confidence and certainty that we need in order to do things. However, when we want to grow, when we want to improve, when we want to overcome a challenge, when we've got a severe issue like a disease or an illness or a terrible relationship or whatever it might be that's holding us back, if we remain unaware of that weakest link because of that blind spot, this thing is subtly, secretly sabotaging all our progress. And we can spend so much, if you can imagine, we've got this chain with say 100 links in it, right? And we spend all our time strengthening all these other links. Like if I just make this one stronger, if I just make this one nicer, if I just make this one purer, right? But we're ignoring the weak link, which is actually the problem. So that's how most of us are going through life. We're trying to improve ourselves, we're trying to work on ourselves, and so maybe we focus on diet when the actual crucial thing is posture, or we focus on posture when the actual crucial thing is our emotions, or we focus on our emotions when the actual crucial thing is developing our prefrontal cortex, or whatever it might be, right? We don't know that, and it's very hard for us to see that for ourselves. So a lot of people say, well, why would you need a coach? Why can't you work it all out for yourself? And this is why. This is human nature. And it's true for all of us. It's not because I'm a coach or because you're a coach, suddenly we're immune to this because we're better. No, absolutely not. This is why we need each other. This is why human beings as a species, we're social animals. We need each other. We help each other to be able to see through each other's blind spots, to be able to see each other's weakest links. Now the challenge is, of course, if you go up to someone and expose to them their weakest link without them having asked you to, without them really trusting that you have integrity, that you care about them, that you have their best interests at heart, without a lot of things being in place first, you don't help someone by revealing their weakest link to them or exposing it to them. You just make it worse. And if you do it in the wrong way, so again, if you don't do it appropriately, then you're really not helping someone, right? So again, in video number 4, we'll talk in detail about how to do this really well as part of the overall process. But I want you to understand that this is really the most value that you can give to someone. And so having fear of the way that they will react is either a sign that you haven't prepared properly, but usually it's just something to overcome, right? Usually it's just applying your courage and saying, you know what, maybe this person doesn't want to hear this on a surface level, but deep down they really want to hear this, because hearing this, understanding this, and working through this is what they need to achieve the life of their dreams, So that's what they come to me for. This is just a part of the process, and I'm going to do it. So here's the thing. If you're helping them by helping to expose their weakest link to them, they can, number 1, become aware of it, right? Which they weren't before. Number 2, they can focus on improving it, right? How can you possibly improve something except for maybe by accident or by sheer luck without being aware that it needs improving, right? And then number 3, they can get, and this is the key thing, disproportionately high results, right? Let me give an example of this from a nutritional point of view that may be more familiar to you, So I've had, several clients, I'd say half a dozen, come to me, all of whom have spent years, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars on all kinds of vitamins, herbs, supplements, treatments, retreats, therapies, on and on and on and on, in order to help these really painful problems that they have. And in each case, we discovered that basically the bottom line issue was a lack of water and salt, believe it or not, right? Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be the case for you, but this is just an example of something that I've come across again and again. It tends to happen when people are very highly depleted, when their blood pressure is very low, right? And when their adrenal glands are overactive. So in that case, I was able to almost like miracle cure them by pointing out that maybe the challenge for them in this particular instance is that they are dehydrated and that they're low in salt, right? And so that had a disproportionately huge effect So that was just a tiny addition, right? Something very cheap, very simple, very easy that completely transformed the quality of their health, that apparently cured things which had been plaguing them for years or even decades, just overnight. It seemed miraculous, but of course what it was is working on the weakest link in the chain. The weakest link in the chain in that case each time was sodium depletion, right, as well as dehydration. So we dealt with that and suddenly everything got so much better. Well, it's the same on a more psychological level, it's the same on a coaching level as well, It's working on seeing what the weakest link in the chain is and working on that, specifically working on improving it, gets amazingly disproportionate results. And that's what makes you so valuable. That's why I can say something as apparently hypey and hyperbole, is that a word, hyperboleous? That's why I can say something as hypey as how to earn 10 times to 100 times as much and mean it, because you really are 10 to 100 times more valuable if you're willing and able to do this, as I'm going to show you how to do. So as I say, we're going to get more into that in the next video, but just to say, the best method to do this is usually questions, right? Now you may be asking questions because you are trying to work it out with them. Maybe you as a coach have already worked out what the weakest link is for them, but rather than just telling them, it's usually much more beneficial for them if you actually lead them to it by asking pointed questions, right? So the art of asking questions and helping them to realize it for themselves is usually much more empowering for the client, even though maybe ultimately it's the same in terms of they can do these 3 steps. And sometimes if the person's resistance and blind spot is enough, then a million leading questions won't do it, and you just have to say, ask for permission and then share what you've discovered. But ideally questioning is the way to go, and usually that is the way to do it. So the other thing you've got to remember is no one else is telling them this, right? Whatever this weakest link point is, no one else has told them this, no one else has shared this. Now in the case of the salt example, that probably just because no one knew, right? No one really guessed. But in the case of other things, like maybe if the biggest thing that's holding a person back is the fact that they're clinging onto a victim mindset, or the biggest thing that's holding a person back is their inability to see the connection between what they eat and the way they feel, or whatever it might be, right? Whatever it is for them that's their blind spot, or their blind spot might be, realizing that eating whenever you feel hungry, no matter how much you've already eaten, isn't necessarily a good idea, right? Or whatever it might be. And these, by the way, are all kind of challenges which I had at one point, so I'm not making fun of anyone, but whatever it may be for them, whatever it may be for you, whatever it may be for your client, remember, no one else is telling them about this. If they are telling them, they're not telling them in a way which means that the client, the person who you're trying to help, has heard them. So, sometimes you can tell a client something, or they, ideally you question them to the point where they realize it for themselves and they are like, eureka, it's a revelation, now I get it, and they start to get massive improvement. And then maybe you might speak to their spouse, their husband or wife, and they're like, I've been trying to tell him or her that for 10 years, But that's okay, right? The point is, that's why I said it's so keen to challenge appropriately, not to just throw out a challenge, right? If you do it in the right way, you can help someone have that major breakthrough. Now, next we're going to go into the 10 qualities of an outstanding results coach, and I want you to realize there's 2 reasons why I shared this with you before I went into that. Reason number 1 is because I really wanted you to get that all the qualities I'm about to share with you will help you be in the place where you won't be scared to do this for people. You won't be resistant to doing it. You won't basically lack the courage or lack the awareness or lack the tact or the sensitivity or whatever it might be to do this appropriately. So if you feel like, I'm not sure I could do this yet, that's okay. That's why we need to work on the qualities, right? Second of all, I also want you to take on this mindset with the qualities. So it's very easy when I go through these with you and ask you to assess yourself, it would be very easy from a kind of traditional, primitive, chimp part of your brain perspective, which we all have, to go into, oh no, I'm no good at that. That means that I wouldn't be a good coach. That means I'm no good human being, and to collapse into, incapacity and I can't and all that kind of thing. And so what I want to share with you, that's absolutely not the purpose of this, right? The purpose of going through this list is, first of all, just to see where you're at. Second of all, also, it's for you to find your own weak spots. It's for you to work out your own weak link by me asking you questions, by me guiding you through these different qualities. And you may well find, if you're being very hard on yourself, you may give yourself like a low rating in many of these, but you'll probably realize there's just 1 or maybe 2 of these qualities which are the ones that you really feel like you're lacking. And what you'll discover is if you actually improve those areas, if you improve the weakest links, everything else will go up. So if you were to give yourself a score of maybe 4 out of 10 on 9 of the qualities and 1 out of 10 on one of the qualities, then you'll find that when you improve the one you would have given yourself a 1 out of 10 out of to even just a 5 or a 6, that automatically, with no other effort on your part, all the rest of the qualities which you had maybe a 5 or a 6 for, you'll become a 7 or an 8, right? Now that doesn't quite make sense, don't worry, we'll go through the process and then I'll remind you of it again. But the point is to understand that so in order to be successful, you need to work on your strengths and you need to really maximize your strengths. And if you're familiar with the personal development and the success field, you'll have heard that before and you know that's important. And I absolutely believe that. But that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is you also have to make sure that you address your weakest links, right? And so in terms of being a coach, if you address the thing that you are, that is your weakest link for you, and if you work on increasing that and improving that in the way that I'm going to show you, which is really easy and effortless and much simpler probably than what you've ever seen before, then you're going to get massive disproportionate benefit in all other areas of your life as well. So without further ado, I want to reveal to you now the top 10 qualities that make you an outstanding, highly valuable health coach and influencer, right? Have a lot of influence in your life in general. So just before I get into these, I want to give you a quick reminder. This isn't an opportunity to get into judgment with yourself. This isn't an opportunity to feel bad about yourself. It's time to just have an honest look at your strengths and weaknesses, look at how we can maximize our strengths, look at how we can perhaps look at improving our weakest link in the chain, which will have a knock-on effect to massively improve all areas of our life and all these other qualities inside ourselves. So now I just want to clarify that we're really only going to scratch the surface with each of these qualities, right? I could do, and in some cases have done, a full hour or two training on each of these qualities. So it's not as if I'm going to be able to do each of them justice. I'm just going to maybe scratch the surface, give you a few of the most important distinctions about each, and then ask you to give yourself a rating on each of these particular qualities. So quality number 1, and the one that we're going to start off with, and the one that I would say is really the most important and really the dividing line between are you going to be an excellent, competent coach, or are you still in need of developing this quality, is maturity, right? So what does this mean? This is actually probably the most important quality of all, I would say, not just to be an amazingly highly valuable health coach, but also to be successful in life in general. And it's one that's very infrequently talked about. So some of the other qualities I'll discuss here, you'll have heard, a lot of you're into personal development and success psychology stuff, but you very infrequently hear about the virtue and the value of this one. I think it's because it's a little bit controversial, a little bit challenging, which is of course why I'm enjoying bringing it to you. But the main reason I bring it to you is because it's necessary. And for a lot of people, this is the weak link in the chain for them being successful. And it's going to be for a lot of your clients. So we really need to pay attention to this. So what is maturity, right? Does it mean being serious all the time? Does it mean you're only allowed to read the business section of the newspaper and not the cartoons? Does it mean you're not allowed to have fun? No, absolutely not, right? That's not the point. Does it mean that you can never be childish? Does it mean that you can never have fun? Does it mean you can never be frivolous? No. Okay, so what does it mean? What does it mean to be mature, and why is it so important? Why is it so valuable? Well, I have a little theory that if you're one of those people who had a childhood who frankly sucked, that's actually quite a good asset in a lot of ways to be a really outstanding coach for a few different reasons. One reason that having a childhood with a lot of pain and struggle and suffering really helps you because it gives you a really big boost with quality number 3, which we're going to talk about soon. But another reason is because I tend to notice that the more that we are asked to step into adulthood as we grow older, as the years pass, as we're a child, the more responsibility that we have to take on. And generally, the more privileges and the more things that we get just for the sake of it that get taken away. And so, especially if we feel very entitled, if we feel very entitled to have everything that we want without having to work for it, without having to earn it, without having to grow and challenge ourselves and be our best self, we can feel kind of resentful about the role of adulthood kind of being thrust upon us, right? So before we could just play and now we have to work, and before we didn't have a care in the world and now everyone's, you know, expecting us to do things and relying on things. Relying on us to do things. Before we had every one of our needs taken care of, usually, right, at least our survival needs, if not maybe all our needs, emotional needs, then, you know, we're basically expected to have to take care of ourselves or to, you know, to partner with someone else and take care of ourselves and each other. So there's a lot of kind of resentment about that, I think, deep down, like, oh God, you know, I have all these wonderful things taken away. And so a lot of us don't embrace maturity. A lot of us don't embrace adulthood, and we don't embrace that role. And kind of a part of us kind of wishes that we could go back to the way things were when we were carefree. So generally, when we have a childhood with a lot of pain, a lot of struggling, a lot of suffering, we are very, very keen to be adults, right? On the flip side, we actually want to be able to have the independence. We want to be able to have the freedom. We want to take that responsibility for our own lives, because maybe the people, the parents or the caregivers who are looking after us are, you know, not causing us to have a very good quality of life, and so we just can't wait to be able to take control of that and be able to take control of our own life and our own destiny, right? So I'm not saying you need to have had a bad childhood to be a good coach, but I am saying that there is a connection between the amount of suffering you've been through, especially earlier in life, and often your ability to really be good in this role. So you can see that as potentially an asset. Something bad that's happened to you is actually now an asset and something that you can really turn into a strength and something that's working in your favor. So what's the deal here? What is maturity? Well, it's a tendency to take 100% responsibility for your own life, right? So what does this mean? It means you're not waiting for someone to come and rescue you or save you. You're not passively waiting for life to hand you what you need. You're not feeling entitled, like you just should have everything without having to earn it, right? If things go wrong, you don't blame other people. You don't feel sorry for yourself. You don't collapse into a heap, right? These are all the signs of maturity. The best definition of adulthood I've ever heard is from a man called Jim Rohn, who's a famous personal development teacher, and he says, the day that you reach the role of being a true adult is the day that you take 100% responsibility for your own life, right? You don't do any of the things that we've just talked about before. And so not only is that the day you become a full adult, but that's also the day that you really have influence, maybe for the first time. That's the day where you really become highly valuable. And that's the day that you become, outstanding as a health coach, right? And you become an amazing example to other people that there is actually value in that, because for everything that we're sacrificing, so what are we sacrificing? We're sacrificing the innocence of childhood. We're sacrificing the carefreeness of having someone else take care of things for us and having someone else swoop in and save us and rescue us. But what we're getting in exchange is we're getting empowerment, right? We're getting the ability to take control of our own lives, our own destiny. We're getting independence rather than dependence, right? Because the good thing about being a kid is that, you know, you don't have to worry about who's paying the bills and where the food comes from. The bad part is that you're dependent on someone else to pay the bills and to provide the food that you need, right? So that independence, that freedom, that being able to take control of your own destiny, that freedom, that empowerment, that comes with maturity, that comes with self-responsibility. Now, it's very easy to see in our society that this is not very encouraged, right? And so throughout most societies, throughout most of history, there's been what's called an initiation, right? Or a rite of passage, where you have a very definite time when it's understood that you're a child and you don't have adult responsibilities. And then you go through some kind of initiation, which is normally actually some kind of trauma or ordeal. And then afterwards, you come out the other side as a different person. You're now an adult and you get treated as an adult, and you have adult responsibilities, but you also have adult privileges and adult powers that you didn't have before, right? Now we don't have that. And that's why a lot of people are stuck in this position where they're still just perennially feeling resentful that life isn't being handed to them anymore, and they're not getting what they feel that they're entitled to, where they're blaming other people, feeling sorry for themselves. Now, obviously we can get into a whole thing here about, society, but that's not the purpose here. I guess the point for you to understand as a health coach is that, maybe society's loss is your gain, in that if you are someone who does take that step, right, to step up to be an adult, to say, yes, it's worth it, I'm willing to give up my easy life in order to have that freedom and that empowerment, then you're going to your life is going to be a lot easier, because generally when we resist reality, our life gets harder and harder and has more and more struggle, right? So for me, I used to be a kid who really, really wanted to be an adult, and I was just constantly struggling because of that. I should have just, and ideally I would have accepted just being a kid and enjoyed it, right? And ditto, if you're an adult who's trying very hard to be a child deep down, then ditto, equally, life will have a lot of more struggling, a lot more suffering. It will be a lot harder than it needs to be because you're resisting things as they actually are, right? So to really embrace that adult role, and again, in case you're not really clear what that is, we're going to just boil it down to one thing for you right here, right now. Do you take 100% responsibility for your own life, for your own actions, for your own thoughts, for your own feelings, for your own destiny, right? If someone does something and I feel a certain way, they aren't making me feel anything, because I am responsible for how I feel. If someone disappoints me or lets me down or ignores me or whatever it might be, I can choose to respond with anger. I could choose to respond in disappointment. I could choose to respond in depression. I could choose to respond in all kinds of ways, right? Or I could choose to respond with indifference. Or I could choose to respond with compassion. Or I could choose to respond with, joy. These are all gratitude. These are all different options available to me. But that's only clear to you and apparent to you from the perspective of an adult. As a child, you feel like people are doing things to you and people are making you feel a certain way and people are making you think a certain way. Now, that's not to say we don't influence each other, right? That's not to say that if someone comes to me and is highly abusive to me, I'm not likely to feel hurt. I probably am. But I'll take responsibility for my own feelings, right? Rather than thinking the other person is making me. Because think about it, if you do that, you're handing over your power to someone else. This person is making me feel bad, and therefore, I'm no longer in control of how I feel, and so I'm no longer free. I'm dependent on someone else as to know how to feel. It's not a good place to be in, right? So anyway, I said I wasn't going to spend too long on these. You get the idea, right? 100% responsible for your own life, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own actions especially. So right now what I'd like to do is give yourself a rating for how you would rate yourself on this from 1 to 10, right? So where 1 is I absolutely have no maturity at all, I take 0% responsibility for my own life, to 10, which is I'm absolutely at full maturity, I take 100% responsibility for my own life. Now, just to clarify here again, am I a 10 at this? Am I 100% mature all the time, 100% of the time? I'd say the absolute definitive answer to that is no, right? And so it's just a matter of degrees. I would say the more that I focus on this, the more I look at improving this, the more that I make this a goal for me, the more that I get there, right? And so if I am taking 100% of responsibility for my own life 80% of the time, which I would guess is kind of where I'm at now, I have the quality of life that I have now, right? And it's a hell of a lot better than it was when I was only taking 60% of responsibility for my own life. And I bet that when I'm taking 90% responsibility for my own life, my life is going to be a hell of a lot better than it is now, right? So it's a process, it's a journey. And same with all the qualities they're talking about here. So I'm just asking you to rate yourself as to where you are right now. And there's no right or wrong answers to this, right? It's just by your own standards. Are you, 1, where you're not taking responsibility for your life? Are you a 10, where you're always taking 100% responsibility for your own life, or somewhere in the middle? Just give yourself a rating. Do that right now, and we'll go to the next one. Now, lastly, I just want to mention, why is that quality of maturity so important as a coach? Very, very simply because it is important for your clients to have maturity in order to get results, right? The more that they are responsible, as I think I talked about in video number 1, the more that your clients take responsibility, the more that their results are guaranteed and inevitable. The more that they abdicate their responsibility and go back into a kind of immature attitude about things, the more they guarantee the inevitability of them not getting the results they want. So in order for them to do that, you need to be a role model for doing that, right? So that's why that one is so important. So let's get into integrity, right? So why is integrity so important? And then we'll look at defining it. The reason why integrity is so important for you as a coach is because without it, your clients will not trust you. And if they don't trust you, well, first of all, if they don't trust you before they commit to working with you, they'll never commit to working with you, you know, A1. So that's really important. But even once they've committed to working with you, if at any point they feel that you're lacking the integrity which you need to have at really 100% in order to be an outstanding and valuable coach, certainly, then they're going to lose faith in you, lose faith in the process with you, and not get the results that they want to get. So integrity at the highest level is huge throughout the whole process, from the very first moment that they first hear about you, all the way to them getting the results with you and beyond. They need to be absolutely certain of your absolute commitment to being in full integrity in all ways at all times, right? Now, let's just clarify what integrity really is, because I think a lot of people think of integrity as basically an interchangeable term with being good, you know, being a good person, being a good boy or a good girl. And that's not necessarily the case, right? So obviously there is certainly some overlap there, but the thing about being good or bad is really more of a moral thing, whereas the issue of integrity is really more a matter of reality or practicality, right? So let me explain that. Let me give you an example. So one aspect of integrity which is really important is congruence, right? So an obvious example of that is if I say I'm going to do it, then I do it, right? That's really simple. And if I don't do it, then I'll apologize for it and make up for it. Okay, so that's taking responsibility for your life, back to point 1. But that's acting in integrity as well, right? But the whole issue of doing what you say you're going to do is really only one example of a bigger picture issue, which is that of congruence, which really isn't a moral issue. So for instance, one says that you must eat a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet, right? That's what's healthy, that's what everyone should do, and they're very dogmatic and insistent about that. And then one says you should actually eat a high-carb, low-fat diet, right? And they swear that's true, and they're very certain about that. And that's what they teach everyone they must do, right? Now, is there an issue of right or wrong here? Well, maybe you think there is. Maybe you think one is right, maybe you think one is wrong. Maybe like me, you think it depends on context. But the point is, if you were to find this teacher, this leader who says that you should eat a high-fat diet and a low-carb diet, if you were to find him eating a meal of, you know, pure fruit and rice and baked potatoes, you'd look at him and go, or her, and go, that's out of integrity, that's out of congruence, that's you not doing what you said you were going to do. And equally the other way around, right? If the person who says you should eat a high carb diet and you find them eating, you know, like a big bag of just nuts and seeds, you might be, okay, well again, you're not doing what you said is right. You're not in congruence with what you said. You're not in integrity, right? So we need to understand it's not necessarily a matter of morality, it's a matter of congruence. It's about you doing what you say. If you make a stand about something, if you say this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is the way that things should be. So for instance, for me, if I were to, you know, stand up now and say these 10 qualities are important as a coach, and then you see me exhibiting the exact opposite qualities of these, right? Now, I admit I'm not perfect with any of these, you know, like I said, but if you see me, especially consistently and a lot, doing the opposite of these, then you'd say, okay, so Elwin is, you know, not in integrity, and you would lose all trust in me. You would lose all trust even if you didn't think I was doing anything wrong. So let's say, for instance, if I were to meet that health leader who said that you should only ever eat, you know, you shouldn't eat carbs, you should only eat fat, and I see them all eating all carbs, I might not think there's anything wrong with eating carbs, but I would lose respect for that person and I would lose trust for that person just because they're not doing what they said is right, okay? And so that's really important here. Now, that's not to say you can never change, not to say you can't change your mind. It's not to say that you can't make mistakes. And so if you're thinking, oh yeah, I remember when I said something and didn't do it. I mean, okay, that happens to all of us, right? But the question is, are you living your life with a general attitude of integrity, Or are you, because of usually a lack of maturity, back to the first point again, are you happy to make excuses? Oh, well, you know, yeah, I know I told everyone else that they shouldn't eat carbs, but, you know, it looked really nice, or, well, I was really hungry, you know? And if you allow excuses to be okay, then generally you're going to be considered as someone who's not high integrity, and rightfully so, okay? So integrity is really important. Of course, with integrity also comes honesty, right? That you don't lie, that you tell the truth. And I would say this is not just because you want to have integrity. You need a real deep love of truth. You know, to me, that's the root of integrity. It's a love of truth. It's a love of honesty. It's a love of things being as they are. And I really see lies and deception and all that kind of thing as almost kind of like a mental disease. I've seen scientific research where it's shown that when people are consistently lied to, they start exhibiting the signs of insanity very quickly. And I think the more you lie to yourself and the more you allow others to lie to you and the more you lie to people, the more that you're creating madness and basically therefore chaos and ill health and pain and trauma and challenge and everything bad in the world, right? So that's a really deep conviction inside me. And in order to have high integrity, I think generally most people who have high integrity, they feel that way too. They really love truth and they have a particular disdain and disgust for falsehood and deception and lies. Now, by the way, we've talked about integrity so far in terms of how other people see you and how you relate to other people. But of course, the number one issue of integrity is not other people, it's you and you. Right? So here's the key issue. If you say to yourself, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to go for a run before I go into work, how much do you trust yourself on that point? And how often do you follow through and do it? That's the question, right? So if every 10 times you tell yourself you're going to do something, you only follow through 1 or 2, that gives you a low level of integrity. And that has all kinds of destructive knock-on consequences, because as bad as it is to have your clients not trust you or your family not trust you, any of those things, those are all pretty bad positions to be in. But not being able to trust yourself is much, much worse, right? Because you're stuck with yourself. You got to live with yourself 24/7, right? So having integrity with yourself is the most important thing of all. In fact, I would say if you accidentally make a commitment to yourself and someone else that clashes or contradicts and you can't possibly resolve it, usually, by the way, you can resolve it, but if you can't possibly resolve it, often it's more important to keep that commitment to yourself, you know? So if you tell yourself, I'm going to make sure that I go to bed early tonight and get a good night's sleep because when I don't, I feel really horrible the next day, just as an example, right? And then someone else reminds you, oh, but you know, you said you were going to go out with me this evening, or you said you're going to watch a movie with me this evening. Now, obviously every case and every situation is different, but as a general rule, I'd say it's even more important to keep your word to yourself and do whatever it takes to make up for that, you know, lack of integrity with that other person, than to betray yourself and lie to yourself and break trust of yourself in order to keep that integrity with that other person, right? Now, I'm not saying that's always the case, but I'm saying as a rule, as a generalization, that is the case, because there's one person whose trust is more important than anyone else's, and it's yourself. And again, the reason why all of this is so important, this isn't just general life advice, is because your clients need to see this in you and they need to sense this in you. If you are someone who, when you say you're going to do something to yourself, you do it, then they will follow suit with that, especially if you are a person of influence. And of course, all of these qualities, especially together, stacked on top of each other, give you a high degree of influence. So it's time to give yourself a rating on these. Again, between 1 and 10. 1 is I have no integrity with myself, no integrity with other people, I don't trust myself, no one trusts me. To 10, which is have perfect integrity, I 100% always do exactly what I say I'm going to do, I'm always 100% congruent. So anywhere between 1 and 10, give yourself a rating there on that scale. Okay, quality number 3, and quality number 3 is absolutely crucially important as well, and generally is not something, so maturity, integrity is generally something that is learned over time. Compassion definitely seems to be something that is developed over time as well, but often it's not as consciously developed. Often compassion comes from the pain that we experience and that we allow ourselves to experience. So I'll explain that more in a second. Let's just define what compassion is for a second, why it's so important. So what compassion is and empathy is the ability to feel what other people feel. In fact, I would say it's the definition of empathy, and compassion is that plus that you care. right? Plus that you really care about them. Because technically you can have empathy as a hunter, for instance. You can have really strong empathy with your prey and kind of know what they do, but you can use it to hunt them, right? So that's not caring. That's not the same as compassion. Compassion is when you have that ability to feel what the other person feels and you really care about them. You care about them as if, as if you would about yourself or your nearest and dearest. You care about their well-being. You care about them for their own sake, right? And so the reason this quality is so important for a coach is because, again, as with trust, if people don't feel it from you, if they don't experience you as someone who cares about them on a very real, deep level, then they're not going to open up to you, they're not going to trust you, they're not going to commit to working with you, and you're not going to be able to help them, right? So this is really, really important. Now, where does compassion and empathy come from? Generally, unfortunately, it comes from suffering, right? So the more that we suffer ourselves, the more that we are aware of and care about the suffering of others. And this is just the way that we work. Now, you may say, okay, well, I've suffered a lot, Elwin, I've been through a lot, I've been through a lot of pain, I've been through a lot of bad experiences. But it's not just the amount of bad things that happen to you. In fact, it's not that at all. It's the amount that you let yourself feel the hurt of those bad things happening. And so generally, if there's too much pain, especially if we're very young, there's more pain than we can deal with, we can get into a state where we numb ourselves and we might be just totally disassociated and numb all the time. We might just have a habit of numbing ourselves fairly regularly, periodically. The latter is probably more me. I was numbing myself, emotionally numbing myself every day with various drugs and other substances. And so the more that we keep ourselves numb, the more that we keep ourselves disassociated, so where we feel detached from our feelings, especially our pain and our suffering, the more that we don't develop that a capacity for compassion and empathy, right? Especially compassion, the more that we lack that caring. And so if you feel that you have a challenge in this area, if you feel that maybe you get frustrated or impatient or judgmental of people and you find it, even though you want to help, you find it's hard to really connect enough to really care about people, that's probably why. It's because you have a habit of not connecting with and not caring about and not being aware of and not seeking to overcome your own pain. You're more likely to stuff it down or numb it or push it down with drugs or food or whatever it is for you. And so we need to look at that, right? We need to work at that. And so this, by the way, is the reason why we are good to ourselves. This is the reason we're good to other people, right? It's because we have compassion, because we care, right? The reason why I look after my own health, the reason why I drink my water in the morning and take my supplements and drink my herbs and all the rest of it is because I care about myself. I care about my own well-being. And the reason why I care about my wife, the reason why I care about my family, the reason why I care about my friends, the reason why I care about you is because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like, in this case, to struggle to really want to help people and not be able to. I know what it's like to lack influence and feel the frustration of not being able to make the difference that you want to make. And so that compassion drives me, right? Now, this is really useful in all areas. We've already talked about it in the previous video, as the first step of influence is actually to really get clarity on the other person, which requires that skill of empathy and compassion. I'm going a bit beyond that here and saying it's not just about really feeling what the other person feels, it's about really caring about them for their own sake, really caring about their well-being. So how would you rate yourself in terms of your level of compassion between 1 and 10? Where 1 is, I'm basically, I'm either completely numb or I'm detached, I'm disassociated, I feel nothing about how other people are feeling. If I am helping people, it's only on a mental level, I don't actually feel their pain, I don't feel their joy. Anything up to 10, which is, I have a very, very deep level of compassion. I profoundly care about everyone, even people who hurt me, people who, should be my enemies. I have this universal compassion thing. And anywhere in between, of course, like most of us are going to be somewhere along the spectrum. So where are you along the spectrum? What kind of rating would you give yourself? By the way, I have some potentially good news for you. If you feel that you score quite highly on this, but maybe lower in some of the other qualities, then that's good news, because this is one of the hardest things to teach, right? This is one of the hardest things for you to learn if it's something that you really lack. I would say that the qualities of integrity, maturity, and some of the other ones that we're going through are actually going to be a lot easier for you to learn than this one, because this does come, as I say, from really having just life experiences. I don't think you can make yourself more compassionate by masochistic behavior. It's not like you can intentionally make yourself suffer to have more compassion. It doesn't work that way. It's real life experiences. It's real life betrayal, real life heartbreak, real life struggle. These are the things that really give you the compassion. So that's not easy for me to teach you. And so if you feel like you have high levels of this, then that makes me really, really confident that the other stuff you're going to be able to master, because you got a reason why, right? Your reason why is powerful because you have that compassion. So you're going to do whatever it takes, if it means mastering these other qualities, to really make a difference in other people's lives. So the next quality, which is really, really important, is a sense of certainty, a feeling of certainty or confidence, right? I really say that they're the same thing. Now, the reason why this is so important and so valuable and makes you so valuable as a health coach is precisely because most people lack this, right? They lack a sense of certainty. And most people feel a deep sense of doubt. They struggle to make decisions. They have a kind of anxiety. And again, I say this not casting aspersions. This is exactly how I live most of my life. So I speak as someone who has been in exactly that position and had to learn the skill of certainty and confidence really from the ground up. So this is something that most people really struggle with. And so if you can provide this to them, you are providing immense value to them. This, by the way, is why people who really don't know what they're talking about or are highly dogmatic will often get a lot of followers, get a lot of influence, get a lot of people, appreciating what they have to say. It's not necessarily what they're saying that leads to people following them and appreciating them. It's the way they're saying it. And it's the fact that they're saying it with such high levels of certainty or confidence, right? So you often see this in any area where there's a polarization, right? Whenever there's a leader, on one side who's saying that one thing, and then the other side that's saying the other thing, and you'll notice that there's a big group of people following, either person on either side. The key thing here is the fact that they're saying it with a high degree of certainty, right? And because they have a high degree of certainty, right? So, on one hand, there's, again, to use the nutritional movement, on one hand, we can say there's people saying, high amounts of carb, low fat is the right way to go, and I'm really certain about that. And everyone who, for whom that is the case, or who would like that to be a case, will really enjoy the person's certainty about that and be attracted to that. And the other side, the person who says, no, high fat and low carb is the way to go, and everyone for whom that's the case, or who would like that to be the case, is magnetically attracted to them and really appreciates that sense of certainty that person has about that. So in order for you to help someone, it's definitely not about you being dogmatic, right? Because we don't want to do that, like those kind of dogmatic people do. But it is about having a certainty in your vocal tonality, a certainty in the way that you move your body. Even if they can't see you, by the way, even if you're on the phone with them, you want to move and act and live and talk with certainty, right? Now, the tricky balancing act I always look at pulling off there is to have certainty and confidence without arrogance, right? And without being closed to new information. So I always balance that with another quality that we'll talk about next, just to keep those balanced. But I want to have certainty about the things that I'm certain about, and then an openness to learning more, or to being corrected, or to having my mind changed if I come across new information which is convincing enough, right? That's the way that I want to look at it. So I absolutely want to have certainty, I want to be confident, but I also want to be open at the same time. Not an easy thing to pull off, by the way. It's much easier to be certain and to be closed to everything, because then you've got no threats to your certainty. The challenge is you're actually in a weaker position there. So if you have certainty and confidence with an openness to learning and new information, you actually have a much deeper level of certainty, because it's a certainty based not on your rightness at the moment, it's a certainty based on your commitment to truth, your commitment to knowing what is right, your commitment to knowing the best way, the commitment to knowing the truth, basically, right? And so, so long as you have that, you have a high level of certainty which new information, new learning, challenge, all that stuff can't shake. That's really the kind of certainty that you want as a health coach, right? A lot of the time when I'm helping someone, I might have an idea as to what they need, and I might, you know, put that to them in the form of a question, like maybe, is this perhaps, you know, going to be helpful to you? And I'll say it with a lot of certainty, but on the other hand, if a person's like, you know, no, and I get that that isn't what it is for them, I say, okay, on to the next thing, right? I don't need to prove that I'm right. I don't need to, you know, it's not about being right, basically. That's what I'm saying. It's about having a degree of certainty, not about the process, but about the result, you know? So I don't have a certainty that I'm always right on every occasion. I have a certainty that if I keep moving forward, that I will get to the destination, right? That's the kind of certainty I would encourage you to have too. So from 1, which is I'm a quivering wreck who, you know, never has any certainty or confidence about anything, and you know, I feel very easily undermined, and I can never decide on anything, all the way to 10, which is I'm absolutely 100% supremely confident about everything I do and every choice I make and every action I take, even if I later learn that you know, a new or better way of doing things. Just give yourself a score somewhere along that spectrum. Another quality that's so important is curiosity, right? And this is really the balance for certainty, which is the reason why I've put it here next. So what is curiosity? Curiosity comes from, I would say, a belief that life is a mystery, or that there is mystery all around us. Now, mystery isn't quite the same as unknown, right? If we were to say that everything around us is unknown, that can be kind of fear-provoking. But mystery is more kind of enticing, right? It's more exciting. It's more like waiting to reveal itself to you. And so when I'm working with a client, I'm always coming from a position of curiosity, right? Whereas I feel that a lot of, especially experts, they're coming from a place of attempting to put their version of what's right onto the client, right? So they have an idea that being a vegetarian is right, or detoxing is right, or whatever, right? And the client comes in and they're looking at, how can I convince this person that my way is right, okay? Unfortunately, this is often the case. Now, I come from, and would encourage you as to be an outstanding coach, you need to come from the place of curiosity, right? It's not about showing that you're right, it's about working out with the client what is right, what is true, more importantly, what is the truth, what is really going to help them, what is that weak link, what is going to make the big difference in their life. So that quality of curiosity, that quality of questioning, even if you possibly know the answer, like I mentioned in the previous section, that you ask questions using the Platonic method rather than just telling someone, is normally by far the most powerful way of really empowering someone. So curiosity, really important skill. Give yourself a rating for that one from 1 to 10, which is 1, which is I never ask why about anything, I'm never curious about anything, to 10, which is I'm constantly asking questions, I'm constantly seeking to discover, I constantly want to know why, or anywhere along that spectrum. So just give yourself a rating for curiosity now. Now, another hugely important quality to be a highly valued, highly valuable health coach is courage, right? And we already talked about the reason why in the previous section, because you're going to need to challenge people sometimes, right? Now, when I teach, when I work with people over extended periods of time, really empowering them to be health coaches and build their own successful businesses, this is one of the things that they often struggle with the most, right? It's putting themselves out there. So there's that in terms of getting awareness of what you do out there, but there's also, and I'd say more importantly, the courage of really challenging people in the obviously appropriate way that they need to be challenged. And so a lot of people struggle with that. They're either not looking for those areas where a person can be challenged because they don't even want to go there, or they are aware of it, but they're afraid to actually say it, you know? So what we need to do is to have the courage to challenge people appropriately, because that is the thing that provides the most value to them, right? Now, by the way, I just want to clarify what courage actually means, because courage, despite maybe a popular misconception, is not the same thing as fearlessness, right? I was actually going to put them together and I was like, no, they're not the same, right? If you are just fearless about all this stuff, then great, fair enough. That's also a very, very handy quality. But courage is especially about the capacity to overcome fear. So to feel fear and do it anyway, which I think is a great book, which I remember reading in my mother's bookshelves many, many years ago. Feel the fear and do it anyway, right? That is the definition of courage. So it's not to say that you are maybe comfortable challenging people appropriately. It's not to say it's easy for you to do so, that it comes naturally for you. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that you're willing to feel the fear and resistance that comes up when it comes to maybe putting the message out there to reach the people who really need your help, or when it comes to challenging people in an appropriate way, which will really produce a major breakthrough, a major transformation for them. It's that you have the courage to overcome that fear and do it anyway. Another quote which I really like on the subject of courage is this idea that the life of your dreams begins outside your comfort zone, right? So if you are the kind of person who chronically sticks within your comfort zone at all times, you're going to find it really difficult to be the best health coach you can be, to really empower people to reach their full potential, because you're not reaching your full potential, right? So to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. Should you live outside your comfort zone 24/7, by the way? Absolutely not. You know, that's going to wear you down very quickly, and that constant adrenal activity will burn you out. So I'm not saying you need to do it all the time, but the capacity, the willingness to do it where appropriate. Not saying you should take your clients outside of their comfort zone most of the time, but the willingness to do it where appropriate is hugely powerful, hugely transformative, and hugely beneficial. So in terms of your courage, your ability and willingness to step outside your comfort zone when necessary, what kind of score would you give yourself? Between 1, never ever, I'm never going to do that, or 10, which is I've absolutely no problem doing that and I do it very frequently already. Give yourself a score between 1 and 10 now. Okay, now this next quality is again not one that you hear about very often in the personal development field or the coaching field, and that's optimistic realism, right? And I've done it that way round. It's not realistic optimism, it's optimistic realism. So what does that mean? Well, let's start with realism. The reason why realism is so important is if you don't have a firm grip on reality, what's actually practical, what's actually possible, well, probably the best case scenario is that no one believes you, no one listens to you, no one takes you seriously. The worst case scenario is that someone actually does believe you, does listen to you, does take you seriously, and makes a mistake because they believe your unrealistic assumptions about things, and you know, you could really get into trouble with that. So we need to have a firm grasp of reality. We need to have a firm grasp of actuality. We need to understand the difference between our hopes, desires, beliefs, etc., and actuality, so the world as it actually is. Now, the challenge with that perspective is that a lot of people who are into realism are actually into pessimistic realism. So they're into the negative side of realism. So most people never succeed, and so therefore neither will you kind of attitude, right? Which is hopelessly actually inaccurate as well. So for me, optimistic realism is actually the most accurate form of realism, because it says that the truth of human beings is that we actually only operate on a tiny, tiny fraction of our real potential, of our full potential. And there's all kinds of scientific evidence which backs that up conclusively, right? That we only really scratch the surface of our own potential as human beings right now. And so to be optimistic about what is possible while not lacking realism is really the ideal balance, and is exactly what your clients need, because they will tend to often have these two forces in conflict within them, right? So the optimistic part of themselves saying, yeah, you know, of course I can lose all that weight and go to the beach and look great and feel great in a bikini or swim shorts or whatever, right? But then the realistic part of them says, who are you kidding? You know, you've had generations of being overweight and you've tried all this stuff before and nothing's ever worked. And so they've got hope and this kind of pessimism clashing inside them. And so what we need to do, rather than just championing this, which is what motivational speakers tend to do, what most personal development stuff tends to do, what most coaches tend to do, is we need to be a balance of both of these. We need to be realistic and optimistic at the same time. And when we do that, we embolden the client to really do what's necessary to get the results, right? So what does that mean in practice? Well, for instance, it means that we don't help our client to create goals which are obviously unachievable, right? Now, we need to be very careful with that. We need to make sure not to put limits on our client based on our own prejudices and our own beliefs. But you know, if there is something that no human being has ever achieved, and it's way outside the scope of anything that a human being has ever achieved, then it's probably not in the realm of realism, although it might still be possible, but it's unlikely, right? So for instance, if you've got a client who is you know, in their late 40s and they want to get pregnant, we can be optimistically realistic. You know, we can say, okay, well, that doesn't happen you know, as often as if you're in your 20s or 30s, but it is still possible, it has happened, you know. But if your client is, say, in their late 70s, then we can say, you know what, not only has it never happened to someone in their 70s, I don't think it's ever happened to someone in their 60s. It may have done, by the way, I don't know the truth of that one, but assuming you've done your research, you could say, okay, well, you know, it's not even happened to someone in their 60s, so the oldest woman who's had it happen is 58, so you're 79, so to be honest, I don't think that's going to happen, but, you know, maybe, right? So do you see what I mean by realism? Whereas, you know, if the oldest woman who'd ever been pregnant was 58 and your client was 59, we could say, well, it's unlikely, but it's possible. And if, you know, the oldest woman who'd ever had it happen was 58, and your client is 52, we could say, well, you know, it's definitely possible, even though the odds may be against you, right? So we want to be realistic and optimistic at the same time. Hope that makes sense. And why? Because that allows clients to, again, trust you, believe in you, and set goals that they can actually achieve. Because you can't help clients achieve goals which are impossible to achieve. So, again, for this, give yourself a rating. What would you give yourself? Between 1, which is that I'm totally schizophrenic with this. 1 minute I'm all optimistic and the next minute I'm all pessimistic and I can't seem to get the balance right. Or 10, which is that, you know, I balance these perfectly at all times and I always have a high degree of groundedness in reality as well as an optimistic attitude. Or, of course, anywhere in between along the spectrum. Give yourself a score now and then we'll go to the next one. Now, the next really important quality to really motivate and inspire your clients to be a highly valuable health coach is passion and purpose, right? Now, I would say it's really passion that's the key thing here, not necessarily enthusiasm, right? So if you're thinking, oh, Elwin, I'm not nearly as enthusiastic as you, I'm not as bubbly as you, I'm not as full of energy as you, I'm more of a chilled kind of person, that's okay. You can still be passionate. You can still be motivating and inspiring to people because passion doesn't necessarily come from enthusiasm. Passion comes from purpose, right? So having a strong sense of purpose. So let me define the opposite of this to be really clear. So a lack of this would be if you feel like you're drifting through life with no definiteness of purpose, right? With no clear intention as to what life's all about, what you really care about, what you're here to do, all of that kind of thing. Now, if you have a strong sense of purpose, if you have a purpose, for instance, that involves, yes, I'm here to help people to get real results. I'm here to empower people. I'm here to help people get their full potential. I'm here to help people be healthier. I'm here to make the world a better place. Whatever, right? Something like that. And you have a strong sense of certainty and clarity about that. That strong sense of purpose will make you passionate, right? Whether you're passionate in the way that you might think of passion, like all enthusiastic, or whether you're a more relaxed form of passionate or a more slow burn, focused form of passionate or whatever, okay? So the reason why this is really important as a health coach is because that sense of purpose, a lot of people lack again, right? As with certainty and confidence, a lot of people lack that. A lot of people can fairly easily slip into kind of feelings of apathy and meaninglessness and despondency and these kind of things. And so it's immensely valuable if you step in there as someone who has that definiteness of purpose, who has that clarity of purpose. In fact, Napoleon Hill, who's probably the most successful writer ever in the field of success and personal development, said that definiteness of purpose is the #1 quality that leads to success, right, in all areas of life. Hugely, hugely important. And drifting, as he called it, was the antithesis of that. There's the thing that pretty much guaranteed failure in most areas of life, right? So passion and purpose is really, really key. And so again, because as a coach you're setting examples for people, if you are an embodiment of passion and purpose, it helps them to feel more passionate and more purposeful. And that means that they're far more likely to see through and get the results that they want to get, right? Because a lot of the time when we lose track, when we get distracted, when we don't persist, when we don't see it through and get the results we want, the reason is because we don't have a strong enough feeling of purpose, right? This is the good motivation, by the way. You know, the bad motivation, the moving away from motivation, the motivation which is more based on avoidance is, I want to avoid being ill, or I want to avoid being sick, or I want to avoid looking bad, or whatever it might be, right? But it's much better to have a purpose which is forward directing, like I want to have the best life possible, or I want to be as healthy as I can be, or I want to live fully and as long as possible, or whatever it might be, okay? Now, when I say good or bad, I'm not trying to put value judgments here. Some people are more motivated by moving away from things, and in fact, I'm one of them. I've had to train myself to be more motivated by moving towards values, but the point is that when you have that sense of purpose, you are more likely to be pulled towards your goal or the result that you want, rather than feeling you have to struggle and wade through treacle to get there, right? So this is a really important quality. The more that you're imbued with it, the better it is for you and the better it is for your client. So just give yourself a rating there, again, between 1 and 10, between 1, which is I just drift through life, I have no sense of purpose, I have no idea why I'm here or what's going on or why life is worth living, all the way to 10, which is I'm supremely filled with purpose, I always move through life with purpose, everything I do is purposeful and meaningful, or anywhere along that spectrum again, right? What kind of rating would you give yourself between 1 and 10? Now the next quality here is hugely, hugely important to get a result in any area of your life, and it's hugely important for you to have, so again you can help your clients to have it, and that's commitment. Now if there's one quality that I've found that's most important than anything else to get real results, is this, it's commitment, right? And 90% of the time when I see people who set out to do something, they do actually take action, but they don't get the result, it's not for the reason they think. They usually think it's because, you know, the method was wrong, or the advice was bad, or you know, they were too weak-willed, or whatever, right? I would say none of those things are true. The bottom line is it's commitment. They didn't make that initial act of commitment in the first place. They didn't make that real decision. Right? I would put that commitment right along with decisiveness. So what is a commitment? What is a decision? Because I find that my definition of it is often not the same as a lot of people who I come across, and I think the definition that I have of it is one of the things that's allowed me to be successful as a coach. So the definition for me of commitment or decisiveness, so to make a decision, is to have no option other than what you've chosen, right? The word decision, you might notice it sounds a little bit like incision. It's to cut away all other options. Now, the reason why a lot of people have a lot of resistance to this is because they want to keep their options open, right? We can look at that in the romantic sphere for a second, right? The reason why a lot of men particularly struggle with commitment, although people in general with a relationship, is because they're, you know, concerned, oh, well, there might be someone better out there, right? Or there might be a better opportunity, and so they're hesitant to commit. Now, you know, I don't want to make any judgments about that in the area of relationships, because that's not what we're talking about here, but I will say that when it comes to getting results, a lack of commitment and a lack of being willing to make a decision, the definition of which is to allow 0% probability of anything other than what you've decided, is not helpful. It doesn't help you to get the result. So when I made the commitment, when I made the decision, for instance, to get healthy, my commitment wasn't just, I'm going to get healthy, or I'm going to do what's necessary to get healthy even. It was, I'm going to get healthy or I'm going to die trying, right? I'm going to do this no matter what. There's a great story which I won't repeat here to try and keep this as concise as possible, about how the Romans finally conquered England. Very, very briefly, the Romans had tried to conquer England 3 times over the course of several centuries, and each time had been unsuccessful. And then finally the general who went over for the 4th attempt ordered his men to actually burn all the boats once they'd landed on the English shore. And the reason was, he says, it's success or death, right? Because they didn't have their boats to retreat with, right? And I really think the exact same mentality is absolutely crucial for success, especially where we're going to come across a high degree of challenge, right? Now, this is really important for your clients, but it's really important for you as well to be a health coach. So if being a health coach is a big step for you, if being a successful health coach by the definitions already given, and of course your own definition, is something that still eludes you, I would say, other than possibly just the fact that not enough time has elapsed yet, this is going to be a huge factor, right? Your commitment, your willingness to burn your boats, as it were, and to allow no retreat, no surrender, no giving up, no other option. Just, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this no matter what. Now, the more that you have that quality, the more that you imbue that quality, the more that your clients are going to have that quality, as with a lot of these other qualities. However, there's an extra component here, which is that your clients really need to know that you're more committed to them getting their results than they are. Now, I know that sounds weird because, you know, the results are going to benefit them, not you, right? But that's the way it needs to be. The more they sense that you haven't really made a definitive decision in the way that I've just described, the more likely they are to give up too, the more likely they are to not see it through and not to get the results. So this is hugely important for your success in anything you do, and hugely important for your client's success. Now, does this mean you should just go around committing to everything and anything? No, of course not, right? This is committing to the things that are most important to you. And this is why this is probably not a first step, right? You need to really get clarity first about what it is that you really want. You need to get clarity about what your challenges are. There's a few steps before this, but this quality of once you are certain, right, that this is a thing that is really important to you, once you're certain this is something you must overcome, in the same way that those many years ago, I think 6 years ago now, I made I had the moment of clarity that getting my energy issues sorted, so improving my levels of energy, improving my health, was my number one priority. It's the thing that I had to do in order to have any success in any other area of my life. It was my weakest link, basically, and I had to do it, right? And so when you have that clarity, you need to make a commitment, and it's not necessarily going to be the case. Not everyone does. Some people have that clarity and then like sag, like, oh, I can't do that, right? So we need to have that commitment. So how would you rate yourself in that, right? From a 1, which is I'm a commitment phobic, I never 100% commit to anything, I kind of just bounce around eternally looking for quick fixes and never getting anywhere, to a 10, which is I'm extremely decisive. Once I commit, I absolutely go for things. I'm absolutely clear on what I am committed to, and I never deviate from that. Or of course, wherever you are on the spectrum between 1 and 10. And now last but by no means least is the tendency for a results focus. Now, if you've seen my trainings before, you may well have heard me speak about this before. If you want to go into more detail about this, there's a detailed training on this if you go to highenergytraining.com and sign up for the high energy trainings there. But results focus, what's the bottom line on this? Most people focus on either what's wrong, or they focus on all the things that they need to do. If you focus on what's wrong, you'll tend to feel bad. This normally leads to a kind of victim consciousness. If you tend to focus on all the things that you need to do, this normally leads to stress and overwhelm, as whatever you focus on, you magnify. So the more you look at things that need to be done, the more things will need to be done, and it's never ending. But if you focus on results, the more you get results. Right? And so in order to really help people, you need to be in a mode of results focus as your primary mode of being, as a successful person, as an achiever, because very simply, they are almost always, during an actual real life coaching session, going to attempt to drag the focus away from results and towards either process or problem. Right? And so we need to keep guiding them back to focusing on results, in order to serve them, right? And show them and empower them to learn that the more that they do that for themselves, the more they guide themselves back to focusing on the results, the more the results that they get. Okay, so this is a really crucial thing because, as we said, the cornerstone of your whole value to people as a health coach, as a results coach, is results, right? People aren't getting the results, then you've instantly lost that value, no matter how many of these other qualities you may embody to a large degree anyway. So you've got to get the results, and they're not going to get the results if they're focused on problems or if they're focused on process. So this is an absolute, essential thing that we need to do. Now, again, as with all of these, do I claim that I'm perfect at this? No. I still need to remind myself. I'm still very grateful to the coaches and mentors and people who teach me, who remind me to take my focus and point it back at the results that I want to achieve rather than the process, which is where it belongs, right, on the results. So again, with this, give yourself an evaluation here between 1, which is I'm always focused on problems or process and I never even consider results, all the way to 10, which is I always consistently focus on the results that I want to achieve and I never get lost in focusing on problems or process. So give yourself a score there between 1 and 10. Now, before we get into the exciting process of adding up all your scores and seeing how you score as a coach, I just want to introduce you for a second to the be-do distinction, right? Because this is really important. Now, I know I warned you about this from the outset, but I just want to really clarify that with each of these, don't feel disheartened or disappointed or whatever if you're realizing that you're not exactly where you want to be yet, okay? Because that is exactly the attitude to take to it. It's not, oh, I'm no good at this. It's, I'm not where I want to be yet, okay? And that's all there is to it. But one of the things that blocks us from being where we want to be in each of these areas is this be-do distinction, right? So for instance, let's take courage. I often have people come across a challenge with understanding this one. They say, oh, I can't do that when I'm not a courageous person. I'm not a brave person, right? Now, the challenge here is that they've become stuck in the be-do trap, right? They think that courage is something you are. Well, you could say that, yeah, I am a courageous person or I'm not a courageous person. That's a reasonable way to describe things, but it's also kind of misleading in a way, right? Because I would say courage is not something that you are or are not. Courage is something that you do, okay? So you may have never done anything courageous in your life. That doesn't mean that you are not courageous. That means that you have simply not done anything courageous in your life, right? You have not made that decision. You have not made that choice, right, to do that. But you could, right? If you're focused on being a courageous person, then you could just make the decision to do courage. And it's the same with all of these. You could say, oh, I'm just not a person with very high integrity. I don't trust myself. I often let myself down. Well, okay, again, I think that's our default position as human beings, is to do something other than integrity, is to do something other than compassion, is to do something other than certainty and confidence. In fact, I would say we would tend to be hardwired to be the opposite of all of these, right? Maybe not all of them, but most of them. We're hardwired to certainly be immature. We're hardwired to see what we can get away with rather than being full of integrity. We're hardwired to be kind of self-interested. We're hardwired to be anxious and full of fear. We're not hardwired to be courageous. We're hardwired to kind of be fearful. At least in the case of most of these, I guess we are hardwired to be curious, but in the case of most of these are not how we're hardwired. This is not our natural default position as human beings. These are things to work towards. These are things to achieve. And so it's not about who you be. It's not about who you are. It's not about being. It's about doing. And so for each of these things, you will find that you are more mature, or you are more courageous, or you are more passionate, or whatever it is that you feel you're lacking, the more that you do those things. And in each case, they are something that you can do. Okay, and now it's time to come up with your score to see how close you are to being an outstanding health coach. So all you got to do is add up the number that you gave yourself for each of these between 1 and 10, and you'll have a figure somewhere between 10 and 100. So go ahead and do that first. Pause if necessary. Great, and then the next thing you want to do is consider to yourself for a minute, what would your ideal score actually need to be for you to be an outstanding health coach? For you to be the best health coach you could be, what would the score need to be? So again, just write that down and then pause if necessary, and then we'll come back to that. So now you've done that, if you take your ideal score and you minus your actual score, what you've actually given yourself for how you are at the moment, you'll come up with the amount that you still need to improve to be the very best health coach you can be. Now, in terms of your actual score for a minute, I was going to do kind of like a Cosmo quiz and give you a, if you scored this and this, then it means this kind of thing. But of course, these qualities are so big and so many of them so different that I felt that that would be an oversimplification. But I will give you some guidelines based on your score, all right? So first of all, I would say if you have a score higher than 80, 85 maybe, and that's probably a sign that you certainly deserve your score for this one, right? It means you certainly deserve a higher score for certainty and confidence. It may mean that you're a little bit lacking in this one, even though you may not realize it, realism, right? And the reason I say that is not to cast any aspersions against you. I'm sure you're an amazing person. The reason why I'm saying that is because we all have so much room for improvement, right? As far as I'm concerned, in my life, every year I get better than I was the year before, and that's been going on, well, ever since I decided to transform my life, and I'm sure it'll carry on being the case. So if I gave myself, say, like a 90 out of 100 now, I would hope that in 10 years' time, I'm going to be a hell of a lot better coach than I am now still, right? And so, how does that fit in? So I would encourage you, if you are giving yourself a score, maybe over 85, something like that, to be open to the possibility that you may have more areas for improvement than you realize. You may have more room for improvement than you realize. And so I really encourage you to look for whatever the weakest link may be for you. Now, of course, if you already have a practice where you're successfully coaching a lot of people to get amazing results and you already are an amazing health coach, then that may be wrong. It may just be that you are already at the pinnacle of your success and the peak of your game, and the only way, the only place there is to go now for you is down. But I kind of doubt it. I think there's always room for growth and improvement. So if your score is very high, I'll just give you that to think about. Now, on the other hand, if you have a score below, say 35 or maybe 40, I would encourage you to realize that you probably have more going on for you than you're allowing yourself to be aware of. So I don't think you'd be able to watch, I mean, it's been a long video again, I don't think you'd be able to watch a video like this all the way through to now if you weren't pretty committed, right? If you weren't full of compassion, empathy, and really wanted to help people, if you didn't have the integrity and the maturity to hear about all the things that you at least believe you were lacking, right? So I don't think that score, that low score, is maybe justified. Of course, I don't know that, but that would be my suspicion. And so the quality for you that may be the weakest link to prevent you from being the best coach you can be, to helping people at the highest capacity, is first and foremost probably certainty and confidence, right? And also possibly optimism. And you've got to realize as well, if you have a tendency to be very hard on yourself, if you see loads and loads of margin for error, margin for improvement, you're probably looking a little bit too much at the problem or the process and not enough at the result, not enough at everything that you have already achieved so far. And so that will be a potential detriment as a coach, is that you have a tendency to focus too much on what's wrong and the problems, right? So in either case, if you have a tendency to ignore what's wrong with the problems, if you're possibly a little bit overconfident, over-optimistic, or the other way around, that's something to really look at as a coach. Now, if you have a score between, say, 40 and 60, something like that, does that mean that you wouldn't be an outstanding health coach? No, it probably just means that you have something to learn, right? You probably need to work on your weakest link, whatever you realize they are particularly, and you probably want to go through some kind of process to really train you and prepare you before you get out there and really start coaching people as a professional. And of course, the Health Coaching Institute certification program, which I'll introduce to you at the end of the next video, may well be a great option for you to do that. And if you have a score between something like 60 or 80, I would say that you're probably already in a really good place. You're aware of where you have areas for improvement, but you're also aware of where you're doing well. And you may already be at a place where you could be an excellent coach, or you may be at a place where you're fairly close to being an excellent coach. So good for you, that's fantastic. So the next question is, you realize that all these qualities are important. You realize probably that at least with some of them, you're not where you would ideally like to be with these. You would like to have these qualities stronger and more. So what do we do about it, right? Well, the truth is, again, as I said before, it's not simple, right? It's going to depend what the quality is as to how you really imbue yourself with more of it, how to install more of it in yourself. And there are numerous different techniques and trainings, etc., out there, all of which that can give you that benefit. However, I just want to introduce you to a technique here which I don't see mentioned very often, even though, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most powerful and at the same time, the easiest method to really install qualities in yourself at a very deep level so that you start doing them automatically, so that they feel natural to you. Because a lot of the time when we realize that we're lacking something like, say, courage or passion or integrity or whatever it might be, we try and act that way, and to ourselves and often to other people observing us, it's obvious it's an act, right? It doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel real, and it's like we're trying really hard to be that way or to have that quality by doing the things as we've already talked about. But it can feel unnatural, it can feel difficult, and worst of all, it can feel false, right? It can feel out of integrity, you know? We could say to ourselves, well, I'm not a person full of confidence, Elwin. So if I pretend to be a person who's full of confidence, I'm not in integrity, right? So what do we do if that's how we feel? What do we do if that's the situation that we find ourselves in? Well, there's a technique which, as I said, is very simple and very easy way of installing qualities in us, but it's also a way of installing them in us in a way that is genuine, and so that these qualities become natural to us. So here it is. So to introduce this technique, I want to open you to the idea that in general, there are two kind of ways to achieve something, right? First way is the yang way, which is the way of kind of going at it directly, going at it consciously, and trying to force it to happen, right? And that can be appropriate, you know, in a lot of instances. If we want to open a door, we don't want to do the subtle, indirect way, we just want to kind of push it, right? Although we also don't want to break it down. That would be an excess of yang, but you know what I mean, right? A lot of things we can just do the yang way. But sometimes, especially when we're dealing with our own mind, our own emotions, our own identity, actually the yin way makes more sense. So the yin way is more subtle, it's more indirect, it's more unconscious, and it's more us achieving something without forcing it to happen. So this method I'm going to share with you here is exactly that way. Now the good news about that is it is easy, right? And it is also pretty quick. It's a lot quicker than trying to consciously force yourself to be confident, for instance, if that's something that you lack, right? So let's go through the process. There's 6 steps to it. Once you learn this, you're going to be in a position where really any quality that you realize that you would like to have is within your grasp. And that's a really empowering thing to realize, by the way, because once you've done enough of this kind of stuff, as you may well have done, you may start to realize that although we think that we have all kinds of challenges and all kinds of problems and all kinds of practical issues and all kinds of physical limitations, what we really usually have is only an absence of the quality that we need. So in order to get wherever we want to go, in order to achieve whatever we want to achieve, we're generally only lacking one or more qualities. That's my firm belief, and if you work long enough as a coach helping people, that'll be your firm belief too. So this is a really important technique to understand, and yes, feel free to share it with your clients in order to help them if you already have clients. So the quick, easy way. Step number 1 is to get clarity, right? To get clarity about the qualities that we need to install inside us, the qualities that we need to achieve whatever we want to achieve, to be whatever we want to be, to do whatever we want to do. So in this case, if you want to be an outstanding health coach, you want to be the top of your field as a health coach, we've realized that there are these 10 qualities which are incredibly important, right? If you were trying to achieve something different, then there might be different qualities that you would need to achieve. So you need to realize what they are first. Now, step number 2 is to find a positive, appropriate influence, right? So, oh yes, we don't just want to be influencing other people, including our clients. We want to be influenced, right? This positive influence thing is a two-way street. So as much as we want to be a positive influence on those who, well, really everyone, and especially those who've asked for our help, we also want to be positively influenced. So generally, the more that you are open to being influenced, the better this is for you. Now, this is not the case if you're living a life unconsciously. So if you're just drifting through life and everything that happens just happens and everything is random, then the chances are that being someone who is sensitive, open, easily influenced will tend to be a detrimental thing, because on average the influences around us, especially in this modern age, are probably quite destructive, and so we're going to be led down a destructive path. But if we carefully select and choose the influences that we have, specifically the people that we want to influence us, and then we allow ourselves to be open to that influence, this is an incredibly powerful transformational tool. So yes, I am talking about people. You want to choose an influence of someone who you can really ideally see and listen to, right? Or at the very least listen to. And of course, if you can actually be around them, if you can be with them face to face, even if it's only some of the time, then that's even more ideal, right? So what we want to do is we want to pick a person who embodies these qualities to a high degree. Now, not only must they embody these qualities, but it must be someone who we actually enjoy listening to, watching, spending time with, right? It must be someone to whom being in their presence, whether that's in real life or virtually, feels like something that we actually want to do. If we're really forcing ourselves to do it and it feels kind of like nails going across a chalkboard and it's really unpleasant to us, then even if the person is very high in all qualities, then this technique will not work because we'll have that resistance. So it's not about maybe who someone else says is a good influence for us, it's who we feel we actually enjoy listening to, we actually enjoy watching, we actually enjoy spending time with, who embodies these qualities, right? So if you can find several people like that in your life, that's great. But to begin this process, you really only need to find one. Now, step 3 is a particular skill which you may be adept at already, you may be completely new to the idea that this is even something that you can do, or anything in between. So I'm just going to explain it as if you're unfamiliar with it. But if you get it, if you do this easily anyway, then just bear with me for a minute. So what we need to learn to do is to put our ego aside. What does that mean? Well, generally, if we're trying to learn from someone else, but our conscious mind is interfering in the process, then what happens is that our ego is observing what the other person is doing, who we want to be like, and then the ego attempts to copy or mimic that other person, right? Now, this is a lot of hard work. And the real challenge with it is, I mean, if you're not afraid of hard work, the real challenge is that the whole time it can feel fake. It feels like the ego is trying to be something that it is not. And that's actually exactly what is going on. So this makes it a really difficult, challenging process. Now, the easier thing to do if you're willing to do it, is to just put your ego aside. So rather than try and change your sense of self, just temporarily suspend your sense of self, right? A lot of the time you can do this just by keeping your ego busy or preoccupied with something else, right? So for instance, you may be listening, stroke watching to some kind of influence, some kind of positive influence, some kind of man or woman whose qualities that you want to have imbued in you, and you may be doing something else at the same time. I know a lot of my listeners, clients will do this, right? They will be doing some ironing or some washing up or some kind of other task, or maybe even looking through Facebook or something like that. And that kind of keeps their ego occupied, and in the meantime they're open to having the influence they want come in without the ego getting in the way. This is actually a capacity which psychologists call the negative capacity, but it's not negative in the sense of being bad. It's negative in the sense of the ability to negate temporarily your sense of self. So you just turn off your sense of self and you just get on with whatever you want to be getting on with, or you just kind of passively, quietly just sit down or whatever and watch and or listen, right? And this is often, by the way, where this technique works better if you're not literally in a room with just that one other person, ironically, right? Although that certainly is powerful as well. But it's certainly something you can do if you're, say, watching them live on stage or something like that as well, right? It's just to kind of relax, tune out and put your ego aside and allow yourself to tune in to that particular person's energy, that particular person's language patterns, the way that they move their body, their vocal tonality. All of these kind of factors together will go into your unconscious, and rather than your ego trying to learn from them or trying to copy them and then getting into a clash with itself about, oh, that's not me, is that me, all that kind of thing, you just put your ego aside and step 4, immerse yourself, right? Immerse yourself in that influence. Now, this is something that I've done a lot in a lot of different ways with a lot of different people, and I have to say it's been the most powerful thing that I've done. Now, if I were to only have ever done it with one person, then that could just mean that I would end up, being a carbon copy of that person, but that's not what we're talking about here. But what we are talking about really is doing it with one person at a time. Right? So you find one person who you enjoy to watch or listen to, and you really feel that they have the qualities that you want, that you need to get to the next level, and then you really immerse yourself in that person. I remember really the first person I learned this with, going back to my story from a previous video, was Tony Robbins, right? I would listen to Tony Robbins for hours and hours and hours every day, and I did that for maybe 3 or 4 months, something like that. And during that time, I went from a person who was highly pessimistic, highly negative, highly whatever, and came out of the other side actually someone who was ambitious and positive and saw potential and had a desire to contribute and all kinds of things that just wasn't true for me before. And it wasn't because I was copying Tony, far from it. It was because I kind of immersed myself in that energy, and I came out the other side as a person who genuinely had those things, because I set my ego aside and I realized that those aspects that Tony was imbuing and embodying himself, those qualities, were really qualities that I actually had inside me all along, but I had repressed and suppressed them. And so just by putting my ego aside and immersing myself in someone else who hadn't suppressed them, and in fact had developed those qualities, that allowed me to realize that actually that was the real me, right? That was the real me. And that's an important thing to realize here, because a lot of the time when it comes to putting your ego aside, we're afraid that we're going to lose our sense of identity or who we are, or we're not going to know who we are, we're going to copy someone else. But that's not what this technique's about. This technique is about putting your ego aside, your ego being the very, very tiny force that limits you and keeps you in your comfort zone, which keeps you basically imprisoned, and putting that aside and immersing yourself in an influence of someone who hasn't got those same limitations, so that you can start to tap into your full potential, right? Now, the next point, like I say, I listened to, in this case, Tony Robbins for a few months. Now, after a few months, I just felt satiated. You know the thing that you have with food, where maybe there's a certain kind of food that you're really enjoying. Let's say it's a healthy, natural one, not some kind of chemical one or some kind of bad food. Let's say it's a really healthy, natural food. Let's say it's broccoli, right? You're just loving broccoli, you're really enjoying broccoli, you're having broccoli in every meal. And then eventually you find that, I don't really want broccoli anymore. I'm kind of done with broccoli. I'm saturated with broccoli, right? So that's the kind of feeling that you'll eventually get after you've immersed yourself. And so when you're saturated, then all you do is move on to the next influence, right? And so for instance, for me, after listening to Tony Robbins for a few months, I felt I already had like an abundance of positivity, but what I didn't necessarily have yet was the focus, right? For instance, so then I started listening to someone else who I felt was, like a razor sharp focus, who really helped me to get to a level of focus which I didn't, realize otherwise that I even had in me. It was that powerful, and so on and on and on. So when you're satiated, really move on to the next influence, which is going to help you to get to where you really want to be, right? And then the last thing, step 6, and this is really important, don't resist when it starts working, right? So to start with our first example, confidence, right? I know a lot of people are challenged with that. I know a lot of people who would be excellent health coaches who are definitely challenged by a lack of confidence. So let's say that you go through this process, right? You got clarity, okay, confidence is what I need. Then you found a positive, appropriate influence. That person seems to be full of confidence and the kind of confidence that I want, right? Next, you put your ego aside, right? You don't worry about trying to copy them and be like them and anything like that. You just, either you just go into a very relaxed kind of trance-like state, or maybe you just keep your ego busy doing something else. You immerse yourself in that person who's full of confidence. And after a while, you will start to feel more and more confident, and you'll start to feel satiated and maybe ready to move on to the next person and the next quality you want to work on. Now, when it starts working, this is really important, don't resist, right? So you may find yourself in a social situation where usually you will feel too intimidated and too nervous to speak up, and then suddenly you may just find yourself speaking up out of nowhere, right? And you're like, and then, so there are two things we can do with that. First of all, the ego can react and go, oh, wait a minute, that's not me. I don't just say things out of the blue when people might object and might confront me, or when, I'm too nervous to do that. And we can shut ourselves down, right? And a lot of the time we have that resistance that can be externalized to the people around us. So for instance, if we were a group of people who are used to us keeping quiet and not saying anything that's challenging, and then suddenly we step up and say, I think this would be a better way of doing things. And everyone around us will just look at us like, what's this person doing? They don't normally do that. And so it's very easy for the ego to go, oh God, I'm sorry, and just kind of slink away like, I didn't mean it, never mind, not ignore me. And so we've got to resist that, right? We've got to resist because what's happened in that case is that you have tapped into your inner self-confidence. You've tapped into your inner certainty, and it's just come forth without you expecting. This isn't you, because some people who decide they want to be more confident, they kind of try and puff themselves up and strut around and act confident, and usually this gets a bad response from people because you can tell that they're being fake, and it generally gets seen as being arrogant. It's like overconfident, and they've gone like too far the other way, and that's not good. But when you just allow that to come from your unconscious, when you allow that to come from deep within you, it can seem like a surprise to everyone, including you. And so we just got to make sure that you go with it. And this is where there's so much value in doing other kind of work, like we talked about, for instance, in the previous video, where we talked about creating a compelling vision of what you want to achieve. And one of the reasons to keep visualizing and focusing on what you want to achieve over and over again. So for instance, I want to be a confident person, or in fact, you'd state it in the positive tense, right? You go, I am a confident health coach. I am a confident parent. I am a confident whatever, right? I'm a confident person. I'm a confident person. And so then the reason why it's so powerful to do all the affirmation of that and visualization of that is so that when it actually starts happening, because you're using a technique like this, which is incredibly powerful and effective, that you don't freak out. You don't start going, oh my God, why, that's not me. I need to go and hide under a rock somewhere. You actually go with it, and you realize that is the true you, and you allow the true you to be unleashed. Now, what's the scientific basis for this, you may be wondering? It's something that's actually fairly recently, like in the last couple of decades, discovered by neuroscientists and evolutionary scientists, which is mirror neurons. So we've actually discovered that there is a significant portion of the brain which is dedicated to allowing you to help mirror other people. And in fact, evolutionary science has come up with the theory that this is one of the things that's allowed the human race to get to such a position of dominance on this planet, is because we are so good at this, right? I mean, all animals do this to some degree. They mirror and imprint and pattern on the other animals in the tribe, other animals in the family, but we do it to a very high degree. So our ability to mirror, not on a conscious copying level, but on an unconscious brain cells just mirroring what they see kind of level, to a very high degree. We're very, very accomplished at this. Now, the thing to realize is that we're good at this whether we like it or not. And we're always doing this, whether we like it or not. So you may think, oh, Elwin, you know, having yourself be influenced by Tony Robbins several hours a day, that's a bit weird, that's a bit, you know, extreme, that's a bit unusual. But the truth is, we're being influenced all the time. You know, we're starting from the moment of birth, when we've got our parents around, probably most of the time, right? And we're constantly being influenced by them, we're constantly mirroring them. And then, you know, we go to school maybe and we're being influenced and mirroring the teachers, and we're being influenced by and mirroring our fellow classmates, and on and on and on, right? For our whole lives we're doing this process. So I'm not suggesting that you do something new or unusual. I'm suggesting that you do something that's really been going on all along, but you do it consciously to actually serve you, rather than having it happen unconsciously in a way that often doesn't serve you, unless you happen to be lucky. You know, if your parents are, you know, if you would give your parents a very high score justifiably in the 10 qualities that we've talked about, then great, you know, you're very fortunate and that's awesome. But most of us probably, just through sheer, you know, laws of random chance, are probably not around people who are 10s on, you know, on every scale of the 10 health coach qualities. And so we want to immerse ourselves and really saturate ourselves with the influences which serve us the most to do what we really want to do in this world and to reach our own full potential. All right? Because if you really, really want to help people, if you really want to help people to be healthier, you really want to help people get results, then I would bet that all the qualities I've just listed are innately in you, right? And if you're already not at the highest level of each of these that you want to be, it's only because you've suppressed them, or because you've not allowed yourself to develop them, or because you've repressed them, maybe because you think they're a bad thing. So I'm going to do the opposite of that, but we're also not going to try and be what we already are, because that would be ridiculous, right? All we do is we show ourselves the example of someone else, this positive influence, who is living up to their true self, and through the mirror neurons in our brain, we allow ourselves to do the same thing too. Now, I want to give you one other reason why learning this and embodying these qualities to the highest degree is one of the most important things you can do for your life, and certainly the most important thing you can do for your career, helping people get real results, get real lasting results, helping them with their health. The last reason I want to give you is that although we all will tend to mirror each other to some degree, the way that it works is that as a species, we'll tend to mirror those people who we feel are more influential, right? So the more influential the person is, the more likely it is that we are going to mirror them. So if we're, for instance, in a group of 10 people and we ascertain, usually on a very animal, kind of below conscious level, that 1 or 2 people are the most influential, we will mirror everyone, but we will mirror those people who are the most influential much more than anyone else, right? And so that's why it's so important for us to be influential as health coaches, because we're not going to spend, you know, 8-12 hours a day with the person in order to make up for perhaps all the limiting mirroring that they're doing as part of their everyday life. So how can we still make a significant difference, right? And the way that we can is by being an influential person, as being perceived by them as an influential person. And the more that we're perceived as an influential person, the more that all their capacity of mirror neurons will be focused less and less on anyone else and more on us and the qualities that we want to imbue the client with, right? So this is why qualities like integrity, certainty, courage, all of these are classic qualities of people who have high levels of influence, and we absolutely want to embody those. We want to, well, including maturity, really all of them. We want to embody all of them because that makes us more influential, and that makes us, again, high leverage influencers, which means that even though we may have a fairly limited amount of time with someone, we make a massive difference in their life because we are stepping up and being a role model for them in the particular areas that they need to work on, and we're doing it very powerfully because we're coming from a place of being highly influential, which means that we are the most service to them. It means we can help them the most. Now, video 4 is the next video. It's going to be the last video in this particular series, in which you're going to learn the 9 steps results coaching system, which is how to help clients get real, powerful, lasting results. So I'm literally going to talk you through in that video the exact step-by-step system that I would use if I were face-to-face with a client or on the phone with a client to actually help them to get a result in real time, right? So we've looked at all the theory, we've looked at all the big picture stuff. Now in the last video, we're going to really hone in and look at exactly what you need to do in order to help someone get powerful, real, lasting results. So make sure whatever happens that you don't miss that. Make sure you pay attention to your inbox. This is going to be the one that really brings you to the next level, being able to help someone. Now, of course, if you feel that you are perhaps still a little bit further away from being able to take on clients or being able to help clients to the highest possible degree, even though you've watched these videos so far and you've appreciated and enjoyed them, at the end of video 4, I'm also going to talk you through the exact process for how you can apply to join the Health Coaching Institute certification program, right? Where you actually join me and a very small limited group of other people in building a business, building a practice where you get to do what you love, helping people get phenomenal results while living a great lifestyle in the process. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you watch all the way to the end of the next video as well. So thank you very much for watching that. I realize that this training again is quite challenging, getting to the real roots of why we often are not successful, the roots of why our clients aren't successful, but by finding out that, we've got to a place where we now know exactly what we do need to be successful as health coaches and how to make ourselves into the very best health coaches we can be. So I look forward to sharing with you the exact process that you would go through with a client in the next video. See you then.